Journalists, gatekeepers of the truth, a voice to the voiceless, a source to hold the powerful accountable. Be it violence, politics, or protest, we're on the front lines of the breaking story. The political and racial climate in America continues to be a fiery battleground, with those covering the news caught in the crossfire. And some politicians have only fanned the flames.
The public doesn't believe you people anymore. Now, maybe I had something to do with that. I don't know. But they don't believe you.
What will it take to bridge the divide between outspoken viewers and journalists whose only intent is to report the truth? Current and veteran journalists give their take tonight. On Record starts now.
Hey there, good evening. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We are going to jump right into tonight's show because when I tell you we have a lot to talk about when it comes to Matters Media, we are going to have an amazing show tonight for you. There is a strong divide that still exists in our nation when it comes to racism and even politics. As you heard at the top of the broadcast, some political leaders have purposely and passionately deemed the media to be the enemy of the state. American viewers who follow these political leaders have this notion of hurling accusations of bias at media companies and the journalists who represent them. In some instances, journalists have been threatened and even attacked for simply reporting the truth. And because viewers don't agree with the subject matter that's being reported, no matter how truthful or objective the story may be. And as Black journalists, we face even more challenges covering the story, having to endure not only extreme and discriminatory opinions, but also the lack of empathy from viewers on how this story impacts us as we set the scene. Lessons have been learned in the past and the present that we can apply or change in the future to better bridge the relationship between journalists and the viewers that they serve. Who better to answer these tonight than my friends and mentors and veteran journalists, Judy Gatson, Steve Crump, Carolyn Sawyer, and Renee Seiler. They are all here tonight on Record. We have decades of legendary and award-winning journalism experience all in the same forum tonight. I am so excited to have all of you here tonight, and really and truly no introduction needed because you are all icons in the world of broadcasting.
You are very kind. You are very kind.
I mean, I'm just telling, listen, as a journalist, I have to tell the truth. I mean, you guys have inspired generations and definitely inspired me. All of you have mentored me in some capacity. I've watched all of you on television and also listened to you in radio. So it is incredibly an honor to have all of you on the show tonight. So let's kind of go through some introductions here. For those of you who are watching in Columbia, Judy Gatson is the evening anchor for the #1 television station in the Columbia market. She's an award-winning journalist on topics ranging from education to consumer issues and has even moderated statewide gubernatorial debates, interviewed influential politicians and newsmakers, and covered the Democratic primary of the historical presidential race of 2008, anchoring the WIS News primetime coverage and conducting a series of in-depth interviews with the candidates. And she has also covered the presidential inauguration live from the nation's capital for Raycom Media. And as a co-anchor of WIS News at 6, she's won 3 Emmy Awards for Best Newscast, several Associated Press Awards for business, consumer reporting, and even education reporting. WBTV veteran journalist Steve Crump has worked in Charlotte for numerous years and has won regional Emmy Awards, produced dozens of important documentaries, and was named the 2016 Journalist of the Year by the National Association of Black Journalists. His documentaries have been showcased by the Smithsonian and recognized by the Library of Congress and the Museum of Broadcast Communications, as well as several regional and national film festivals. He has been inducted into the Kentucky Journalism Hall of Fame, and now most recently, Steve is honored by the USC Center for Civil Rights History and Research for donating his extraordinary collection of civil rights documentaries and research to the university. Judy and Steve, you guys have both talked about that recently. I mean, Steve, that's an amazing honor, and I can't tell you how glad I am to have you be a part of this discussion to talk about the past, present, and the future when it comes to journalism. Carolyn, so glad to have you here as well, too. The founder and chief executive officer of the Tom Sawyer Company. She has served as its president and set the strategic direction for this fast-growing communications firm since inception in 1996, and parlayed her mastery of mass media into creating a firm with capital sales that exceed the multi-million mark. Her cutting-edge business practices have garnered attention from USA Today, where she was cited for optimizing Wi-Fi communications access to augment her business capabilities years before it even became a mainstream operational tool. Carolyn, of course, is a former WIS anchor, a former network correspondent for ABC News and Lifetime Television Network and NBC News, and author of the inspirational guidebook for entrepreneurs, Forget the Glass Slipper, Build Your Own Castle, 10 Traits of a Multi-Billion-Dollar Business, and you've been co-authored ABC's On Media. Also, we have Renee Seiler. So glad to have you here with us tonight. Renee as well, co-host of the CBS Early Show when it debuted in its 4-hour format back in 2002. Interviewed First Lady Laura Bush, former President Jimmy Carter, former Secretary of State Colin Powell, Senator John McCain, NASA's first female shuttle commander, Ida Collins. She's an active member of the National Association of Black Journalists and is a recipient of the 2004 Gracie Allen Award for Individual Achievement in the National Best Anchor category for her series on breast cancer. In 2007, she published the book Good Enough Mother, the perfectly imperfect book of parenting, because she was frustrated watching mothers buy into the unrealistic views of motherhood, and she now uses her platform to empower women to do what works best for them and their families. Wow. So much amazing talent right here in one forum. Judy, I want to start with you because you were the inspiration for this forum tonight. We recently had a conversation at an event here in Columbia, and we talked candidly about some of the issues that you face, especially covering the presidential election as of recent. Just from even some of the things that I've seen you post on your Facebook page, you've gotten a lot of feedback from viewers that was not necessarily very positive, and you've had to go in.
Listen.
I thought for a second you was going to have to tag me in for a second. I'm like, what is wrong with these viewers? What is really going on? All we're doing is covering the news. Why is this happening? Judy, kind of give us your testimony of what you've experienced as of recent, because it really is mind-boggling.
Well, you know, journalists have been introduced to the world of alternative facts, right? And so once we started hearing that come from the White House, everybody just started thinking they could make up their own facts. And as I point out to people, you know, as we're engaging, I'll call it engaging on social media, is that you are absolutely entitled to your own opinion, but facts are not negotiable. And so even in journalism, and I know different stations around the country handled it differently, but you take the simple concept, which really is a very simple concept of referring to the President of the United States with the full title on first reference and only the last name on future references. And all of a sudden, when Donald Trump was in the White House, everybody got upset anytime you just use the word Trump. And I'm like, well, first of all, people didn't take exception to that. You know, when you're talking about President Obama or Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell or Congressman Clyburn, I'm like, it's actually just a principle of journalism. But at some point you say, am I going to spend all day trying to educate people on journalism? Newsrooms have discussions of, you know, are we going to say Mr. Trump on every reference so that our inbox doesn't get flooded? And you just can't compromise principles of standards and policies. I mean, it's exhausting sometimes to educate people about things that in your realm are so simple and really non-controversial. I'm like, if y'all want to argue about something, there's plenty of things that really are controversial that we can debate about and have discussion about, but that's not one of them. That's just not one of them. Carolyn, you and I have had these conversations on many occasions, you know, and I've had discussions with people, you know, on social media, and that's the other thing where, Brandon, I think we're seeing, I don't know, a new landscape, a new discussion, is that people think because you're on TV that, you know, they can, I call it keyboard courage, where they can just get on your page and say whatever, whenever, however, and that's just not going to fly with me. So I don't spend my whole day moderating conversations on my Facebook page, but I do plan, you know, if I'm going to post something on Facebook, I make sure for particular posts that I do have a chance to check in on it and moderate that conversation, just to do fact check here and there. And usually once you do it a little bit, other people will pick up. I mean, you know, that's a whole different full-time job. And you know, I have to draw a line of how much time and energy you're going to invest there. But the bottom line is facts matter. Facts matter.
Facts do matter.
Yeah, when you talk about, it's important to point out. You talk about fact checking. Steve, I want to bring you in on that because I think that we have this whole cognitive dissonance that clearly exists at this point, where viewers feel like they don't have to do their own fact checking when it comes to the information that they put out. They will come on to our social media platforms, literally, as we say with the gun, half cocked, and put information out there and want to attack us. And it's like, you don't even know what you're talking about. Like, really? What do you say about that, Steve?
Well, Brandon, I think in some ways, it's like that saying, if you're going to show up, you better come correct. And I think by and large, that's what we've managed to do as African-American journalists. Unfortunately, too often viewers or haters, if you want to based on Judy's presentation there,
yes,
they want to do appearances say on information that's in front of them. It's like a duck. But in some, instances, or call it a fraud, or some, especially story, dealing with the story, and then at least having a set a moment.
I think Steve, I think your audio is breaking up a little bit, but I kind of understand exactly what you're saying in terms of, you have to come to the table and you have to come correct. If you're going to present information and try to present it as facts, when you're attacking somebody, then you need to make sure all of your facts are right. And Carolyn, I think that's what Judy was kind of leading off with you as well when it comes to that. I mean, let's be real about this. I mean, as far as all of you are concerned, you've been in the business for decades. So why would someone on your page and want to even question that is my question to you, Carolyn. What is really going on here?
Well, it's always worth a try, right, Brandon? You can give it your best shot. But I have last year, I mean, things have gotten so crazy out here in terms of people playing facts and loose with facts that I have managed to spend the whole year and create an entire show designed to correct the falsehoods that were out there related to COVID. And in fact, when we went to our folks at Kellogg and said we want to do this show, we said, look, we want to give some facts to calm fears because this stuff has gotten so crazy, people don't know what to believe anymore. And so, I've appreciated obviously what Judy has out there in terms of her platform. I follow Renee and Renee's conversations, and we'll jump in sometimes on those on Facebook. I have one golden rule. I won't do profanity. You can't do profanity. I let everybody, whatever party you're on, just don't get out of line, and I will call you out of line. Some of my Republican friends have been missing of late, though. But I feel like I need to call people on it. And if it's not true, I am going to call you on it.
Yeah. And Renee, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you. Bringing you in on the conversation, how do you feel, now that you are now out of the broadcasting world itself, but you are obviously very engaged on social media. How do you feel sitting back and watching all of this as it's playing out? And I'm sure you're connected to plenty of other journalists, and you're hearing their stories of frustration when it comes to all of this bad banter online on social media. If this were you, are you feeling the same sentiments as everyone else? Or are you kind of feeling like, okay, we did have standards where we could not respond a certain way to certain viewers, but now, hey, it's on.
Well, I mean, what I would say is just to, before I dive into my own answer, just to piggyback off of something Carolyn said, I actually do use profanity, so and lots of it. But you know what? That's like my release valve. It makes me feel better when I cuss. I don't know what that's about, but all I know is I'm trying to survive out here. But just to echo on what the other panelists said here, there really is a truth problem nowadays. Because of social media, it's biggest thing is confirmation bias, right? So we end up surrounding ourselves with people who think like us, who look like us, who love like us, who, you know, all of they may believe as we do. And so as a result, the sort of outlaws, the ones that Judy might have on her page that might not normally be in her friends list, but maybe follow her or whatever, they might have a completely different opinion. So when they come in, they're coming in with basically what Judy said, they're alternative facts. And this is where we are right now. There are actual media companies whose job it is to obfuscate. I can never say that word right. You know what I'm trying to say? To confuse. I can name a number of conservative media outlets whose job it is to literally just confused. They're putting out half truths, or in some cases, no truths. And people are running with it. They're taking it as well, I saw it online, therefore it must be gospel. And that's, again, where I think, you know, Steve talked about it. From where I sit, I feel like we've got to create better and more savvy consumers of news and information, because now it's really, you know, they have to be more discerning.
Well, you know, part of the thing that I'm figuring out as well too is that it just seems like there's just an overall distrust when it comes to viewers. Like they just don't know who to turn to, who to trust, because obviously we know that there are biased organizations out there that do report information that is not completely objective. We know it might be left leaning, it might be right leaning. But, you know, as far as everyone who's on this panel tonight, you know, I know all of you to be very much, you know, above board and make sure that you are reporting the facts and nothing but the facts. And that's the reason why I have you here tonight, is because, and then we get all of these questions about it. And it's like, why? I mean, you know, we don't trust people in general, but there is that major need of responsibility on, you know, the consumers. How do we create that responsibility? It should be some type of educational class. I mean, Judy, I know you take everybody to the Judy Gatson eloquence class every single day. So I can just imagine that. Yeah, I would sign you up to be, yes, I would sign you up to be the teacher of that class, to teach our viewers to say, hey, listen, you know, there's a way to have discourse and there's a way to have disagreements, but what's not going to fly is for you to just report outright lies.
Well, and that's the thing, you know, if you want to just spew back and forth, then, I mean, you know, you can do that, of course, but you don't end up in a better place. And so, you know, my goal is never to convince somebody to come around to my way. I mean, I'm just reporting the news. It's not my way. It's like, you know, I reported about passing, you know, the stimulus bill. They're like, well, Judy, do you support this? I'm like, I haven't even read the bill. Most of the lawmakers haven't read it. So I'm reporting the news. Like, this is the job that I do every day. But I think it's just, honestly, complacency and laziness. People are responding to headlines instead of reading stories. I mean, the Dr. Seuss story, what was it, yesterday or today? My days are all running together, is a perfect example. You know, the headline is, you know, 6 books banned, and everybody wanted to go off. And on stories like that, I do try to do more than just post, you know, it's banned. I try to give some context for what that decision was, because it is so easy to respond to a headline. And, you know, if you have 100 comments on a post, you might have 2 people click to read the article, right? But I saw on my thread where there kept being, you know, the recurring theme was, oh, cancel culture. And I said, you know what? You know, again, not to persuade, but in my view, I'm not sure that this is what most people would consider cancel culture, because nobody's, you know, banning them. They're making this decision for their company. They're entitled to run their company however they want. And before all of y'all found out what cancel culture even was, they were talking about doing this last year. They have a right to review their inventory. And how about those 6 books? Have you even read those 6 books? Do you know what the racial stereotypes were in those 6 books? And it's perfectly okay to find out what all of that is and what the decision was before you weigh in on it. Just because something is posted doesn't mean that you have to make a snap judgment. It's okay to get a little bit of information and offer an informed opinion. So that's what I try to communicate when having those discussions online.
Would you like me to try to?
Judy, you bring up a lot of excellent points there. I mean, you know, when it comes to being able to fact check so many things and ensuring that all that information is put out there accurately and most effectively. There's a story that that was said. I'm glad you're bringing that up, because it seems like almost every single day we're having stories that are posted and people are you know, creating all of this discourse online. And my production manager Dennis, who's here tonight, he actually I saw his commentary on it the other night, but it was a story that one of our local stations posted here in Columbia, and it was about the use of a racial slur. And I'm not sure if you guys have seen this particular story. Judy might be familiar with it, but there were teachers at this school who were apparently playing Scrabble, and they decided to use several letters, and they came up with a racial slur, and we'll, you know, say it, coon. And so their defense was, okay, well, we were trying to form the word raccoon. And so all of the commentary online now, there's several people online saying, okay, what's the big deal? Why are people being so sensitive about this word? Well, there's a reason why, because it is a racial slur. And the point I'm trying to bring up, and Steve, you can definitely chime in on this. Why is it, because it exists even in our newsrooms as well too, why is it that we, especially as Blacks and Black journalists, are the ones who are doing the deep dives and looking into our stories to make sure that it has the balance, it has the sensitivity that needs to be there? But then we have others who are not so educated when it comes to racial issues or even political issues, and they're just skating by. That's something that is journalism 101, to know that, okay, you got to do the research to know exactly what you're putting out there and what you're talking about. That's day one.
I actually could jump in here on that. I think that stems
one of the
from
things that
oh, go ahead.
No, go on ahead.
Go ahead, Steve.
No, go on ahead. Yeah. Well, all right, Brandon. I'm sorry that we're talking over each other. Let me say this, and I'll keep it brief. The information that I encountered in covering Hurricane Guy calls me the N-word. It goes viral, the whole bit. But even beyond that, in that situation, you know, of the exchange, the long version of it, you know, I had to basically question this guy and just ask him straight up. I'm like, dude, what is it you know about the 9th and the 14th Amendment? And in doing that, there were some folks that said, hey, you know, you took that. And the reality is, it's almost like, you know, as I call it, the Eric Bass School of Journalism, where you throw the rock, break the window, and run away, you know, from the standpoint of not necessarily understanding what everything is in its full context and full tilt. You know, had this person been enlightened, maybe that's just kind of a Donnybrook on Broad Street in Charleston was not the way to go in this situation. But in bringing up, you know, some constitutional and historical kinds of aspects in that, I think it informed the viewer as well as maybe even broad situation.
Okay, we kind of had your audio going a little bit in and out there, Steve, but we did make out what you were saying. Renee, if you want to chime in well too, from this point.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about what you said. Why is it that we have all of the onus is on us to make sure that all of the other elements of the story are being told properly? I got to look at it from your standpoint. I got to look at it from that standpoint. I got to look at that. And I think that's obviously one of the tenets of good journalism, right? But also, I think being Black in these and operating in white spaces, this is what we do. That we are already consumed, or perhaps not consumed, but we are at least aware of how we are perceived by these other people in these other spaces. And I believe that hypersensitivity is weighs into what you were just saying there, Brendan, about how, we're the ones who are always looking at making sure these stories are told from all these elements and aspects. But that's I believe that's just part of our life, that we know that when we go into a store, how we're going to be perceived. And so we're already aware of that. Those things are, top of mind.
I was just thinking, Renee, we've probably done that from the first day that we went into a newsroom to cover news. And we think of everything obviously being news. Often we are that sounding board in a newsroom where we have to say to people, no, stop. You're doing what? Why are we doing it that way? And sometimes, unfortunately, it can get exhausting after you've done it about 2 decades. But I think all of us from the very beginning, I think about, when I first went into the business in the early 80s, I was in Spokane, Washington, and they used to have area nations that would have protest rallies on the weekend. And I was the weekend reporter, weekend anchor, and there became the big question debate. Did you send the Black reporter to go and cover something of that nature? I then fast forward towards the, latter part of my career. And I can remember being in South Carolina covering Susan Smith and using that wisdom of being a Black reporter. And the night that we got this report into the newsroom that these children were missing and that were taken by an African-American man, I was the one who had to say, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't know that. What we know is the children are missing. We'll sort out this African-American thing in the morning, right? But we know that at this point for the 11 o'clock news, these children are missing. So our discernment is something that is critical. And that's why for years, ever since I've been a part of NABJ and any other journalistic organization, we've advocated to have the diversity in the newsroom so that we understood the diversity from a racial standpoint, the diversity just from a lifestyle standpoint. And so that is so critical. But if you don't have that, if everybody is thinking the same, you run into the kinds of things like fake news because everybody believes that's their reality.
Carolyn, I worked in Birmingham. My second television job was in Birmingham. I was a weekend anchor there. And I actually did get sent out to cover a Klan rally. And it's, you want to talk about like the things that test your mettle. That was one of them. But very similar to your story, I can remember standing up in the newsroom and trying to explain that a Black man is not an accurate description of anything. You can't say the suspect was a Black man because I have a son. Is he, what did he look like that? Was he an older Black man? Don't you think we need some qualifiers in there? But all the time there was that, and this was probably in the late 80s. So, but all the time that's what we were up against was, trying to toe the line on things like that, which is just good journalism.
Absolutely. Sadly, it continues. It really does continue. What prepared me for Susan Smith is I had been in the Boston TV market before. And I don't know if you all remember in Boston, there was the case of Charles Stewart. Some similarities. Yeah. Charles Stewart, pregnant wife, leaving birthing class, can't claim that a Black man shot his wife. The police in Boston turned that city upside down. And what were they looking for? A Black man in a Black jogging suit. And I can remember I was just moving there that weekend and my dear father was with me in possession of his Black jogging suit. And literally I had this fear of, this is the description and that's all they have. And they literally turned communities upside down to find this suspect that didn't even exist. So it's been out there for a long time. Unfortunately, it's not going away. I see those kinds of stories. I will call them out. The beauty and freedom of being independent, so to speak, or a free agent, as they say, is that you can often call it out and challenge it. And I try to do that in a respectful manner and hopefully educate people in that process. But sometimes you get tired of educating. I'm almost 60 years old. How much more I got to educate these people?
But Carolyn, that makes me think about, and I can't remember how many years ago it was, but remember the case with the South Carolina trooper, Sean Rupert? And he shot the unarmed Black motorist, and absent the video from the trooper, the body cam video, no one ever would have believed that man, about his story. No, the Walter Scott shooting in Charleston. All of these stories that are now coming. And they've played out over and over and over again, across the country. And then you look at cases like, the Mother Emanuel shooting and the way that those cases are handled differently, and how the onus is on us. I mean, I remember there was a young white guy who was stopped, that night. And it was, I was the first one to say, I'm like, well, it's a general description, but it comes from what Renee was just talking about, and the conversations that we have in newsrooms about, when police, just because police put it on the news release doesn't mean that that's what you put on air. I mean, you look at that and you have to examine it and say, what is the relevance? I mean, do we have an active search going on right now? Or is this something that happened 3 days ago and y'all have no idea who this is? And this is a generic description. I mean, all of these things play a role in determining what ultimately is responsible journalism.
Absolutely.
But the other part of that is play a role of duality, being both gatekeeper, the viewers in the community, and gatekeep management and get it. I mean, I covered both Susan Smith and the Mother Emanuel shooting. You're having to deal with management on one side in terms of, all right, what do we cover? How do we demonstrate a degree of sanity? But at the same time, going through, especially what Judy you've gone through, is how do you balance it out to keep the wolves away and and fewer people taking shots at your coverage?
Okay, I think we might have lost Steve for just a second there, but Steve brought up some good point. We all brought up some very good points in terms of newsrooms and how they play a role in that, and that is something I think that newsrooms can really learn from, especially in this day and age. We're getting better. We're seeing things get better by and large, but there's still a good ways to go when it comes to ensuring that even our management staff, Judy, we talked about that. Even management staff in newsrooms has a certain level of ensuring that everybody doesn't look the same. You have to have cultural diversity in a newsroom, and you also have to have that level of diversity in your management as well too. Because if you don't, then obviously your coverage is there's going to be a lot of tunnel vision when it comes to your coverage.
Well, and it goes back to what Carolyn mentioned earlier. So many times when you talk about diversity, people think you just mean race. But, if all of your news managers are married, they have a particular view. If all of your news managers are from Columbia, South Carolina, they come with a particular life experience. So it's really about the diversity of life experiences. If all of them are in a particular income level, they have a particular view. So it's about bringing diversity around the table from a life experience perspective. And, that's something that I always learn so much from Carolyn about, in terms of amplifying different voices and bringing different opinions to that decision-making table in the editorial process. Because a lot of people don't even understand how newsrooms work, but about having that representation, I mean, it matters.
And I also think, when you're talking about diversity, and we also need to look at gender equality, the LGBTQ communities, things like that. The one piece that does give me pause for all of this is that you have to. It's good to have diversity, throughout your ranks, but the people need to be empowered to speak up and to make changes, because we all have seen the back of all of these, a Fortune 500's annual report, and you're like, there's the one brown person, sort of off to the right. You just see the head; it's like that big, and you're just wondering, like, were they thinking of space? Were they really bigger? And did you value what they had to say? Did you value what they brought to the table? The piece about this that is sobering to me, about this overarching theme about newsrooms and news, electronic news gathering and all of that stuff, is that the pie is shrinking in television news. We know that that there are other ways that people get their news. We know that there are two ways to make money in TV news: you either cut expenses or you add inventory. Well, you look at, as we know, broadcast is the bread and butter is advertising. And so either pack those news holes through all the ads, or you cut back on your resources. If you cut back on your resources, how good is your product going to be? For example, in New York, where I just was, WCBS on the weekend they had one camera crew to cover 5 boroughs, and I didn't live in Manhattan. I lived in north of White Plains. So the news that was told to me through, say, Channel 2 in New York about a story going on in the Bronx doesn't mean anything to me. And so because of that those kinds of things are what we're up against in terms of the realities of electronic news gathering. The other component of that, though, is that if money is a thing, you're not going to be getting more crews. They're going to be finding different ways, inexpensive ways to cover all those various things that I was talking about, the various bureaus and things like that. And so what does that mean in terms of what your coverage looks like? Are you hiring people who, with an iPhone and a tripod, and giving them $15 an hour to cover what's happening in White Plains and to put on your news? I mean, things like that. That's what we're up against. Is money.
Yeah, we can talk about funding. I mean, that's a huge issue that we've faced a lot of times, because we always talk about content and how that is put out there, the way it's delivered. And I've seen it all the time, especially rising the ranks in management, where it seems like, reporters and journalists this day and age are getting younger and younger and younger. And so that level of experience that we talk about oftentimes, it takes a while to cultivate that. And so then your product obviously starts to suffer from there, and then you have those in the newsroom as well who are riding on the backs of the more established, the more veteran journalists. And then you guys are having to step up to the plate and have to basically hold a class right there in the newsroom before we're even going on the air. So when we talk about, Renee, you brought up a good point. Newsrooms need to understand, and news companies do need to understand that, yes, funding is so important. And, you want to be able to ensure that you're putting out the best product possible. So that way we are putting out and can continue to put out news coverage that is going to be fair and balanced, and also told, where it's not going to be through television. That's definitely something that I think, Carolyn, you've experienced over the years, Steve as well, because you see so many things happening with management coming in and out of the newsroom. You see different reporters coming and going over time, and your product definitely can suffer if you're not very careful in terms of who you are bringing in and that level of experience that you're looking for.
We would be remiss too if we didn't take a moment and really try to encourage folks who might be watching to consider all the cracks that are available in a newsroom. As Judy said, a lot of people don't understand how the meatloaf gets made before 6 o'clock, right? But we need to talk about those management positions. We need to talk about having more producers that are of diverse backgrounds. We need to talk about having more news directors. We need to talk about, if you're going to be talent, and I think everyone sees talent and thinks that's where they want to be. But even if you're going to be talent, you want to be talent with a role at the table in terms of what ends up on that nightly show. Does that require a little bit more time and commitment? Absolutely. But I think in the end, will be a whole lot better about what you're putting your name on and what news you're delivering at 6 o'clock at night, if you had some input in that process. That happens early in the day, but we really need to encourage young people to look at all the different roles you can play in the news operation, be it broadcast or print or these days new media, but all of the different management type roles that make decisions.
That's a great segue to give a shout out to Rashida Jones, a former news director at WIS.
I'm sorry.
No, Steve, I was just giving a quick shout out to Rashida Jones, who was our former news director at WIS and made the transition up to the network, and now is the first African American to be head of a network. And we just saw, I think a couple of days ago, that MSNBC for the first time has won the ratings race, which goes back to what Renee was talking about, the money, right, Renee? But to see her succeed is so encouraging. I mean, she's a trailblazer. I mean, she worked so hard, and she came through. We knew that we were blessed to be in her presence. that she had,
Very-
you know,
very much
stars.
I am a
but
huge.
that representation, you know, matters, and to be in the decision-making table. And before she took over, you know, the leadership position at the network, she was over their debate coverage, and look how important, you know, the political debates ultimately ended up being in the process, in covering the election process. So that speaks to the point Carolyn was making as well about the different tracks, because she could be a talent and be on TV if she wanted to, but she chose a different track.
What I wanted to say was that in many instances, and I'm a huge fan of Rashida. I remember watching her in the newsroom at WIS when I would come through, and having stayed in touch with her through NAPJ and you know, news directors meetings here in the Carolinas. But the point that we talk about in some instances, you know, as it relates to diversity and management and selections, it's life experiences. I mean, when you talk about the reporter or producer or even a news director has in a newsroom, what's the series of life experiences that they have that guides the process day in and day out, and so to show.
Yeah, when you talk about that day in and day out, life experiences they can teach you so much. And when you don't have those life experiences there, Judy, that's something we talked about all the time. You know, being able to have that level of empathy. And I think that is what is missing in so much of what we are seeing in media as a whole, and even on social media. There is a complete lack of empathy. We have one of our commenters, and thank you everyone who is commenting on the show tonight. Everybody's so excited to have you guys here. But it looks like Alan Wallace commented, and he said, I feel like a victim of sensational, I believe he meant to say sensationalism. And as we always say, you know, sometimes you don't want to be that media organization that sensationalizes the news. And I think that is what so many people are getting confused when it comes to what news we are covering. They think that everything is sensationalized, and that's not the case. And you have to have that level of empathy to sit back and say, okay, you know, what is the story that's being told? You know, look at all the facts of the story, and to be able to look at it from an empathetic eye to understand, okay, the people that are impacted by this particular story. That is what is missing so much in our, you know, not only in our coverage, but also with viewers who are watching the news. It's just a complete lack of understanding. And I think that is what we are seeing as a whole right now play out in so many facets of the media itself. You know, and I think that's the issue that you face, Judy, when you are engaging with so many viewers every single day, is that they're not understanding enough, you know. So that's a big issue that we're facing right now.
You know, and you have to just take a step back, and you know, there are always good reminders. I was having this conversation with my husband the other day that Dawn Staley, y'all know I'm a huge Gamecock basketball fan, but she wore a shirt that said "Good Trouble" on it. Now, all of us on this broadcast know exactly what that shirt means, who said it, the significance of it, all of that. And there was a woman on Twitter who was like, Judy, please tell us, you know, what Dawn Staley's shirt means tonight. Now, there are a lot of ways I could have responded to that. I mean, because it's like, oh my gosh, you know, how could you not know, right? But you know, you take a second.
Life's experiences.
Like, yeah. I mean, you know, some people don't know. You know what I mean? You just have to recognize that people don't know what they don't know, you know, and so you can approach it in a lot of different ways. And I think that doing that in a way that invites a conversation rather than making people feel embarrassed or, you know, ignorant or whatever, that's just not constructive. And Carolyn, I can't remember if we shared this story. Steve, I think I've talked to you about this before, but, you know, going back to Mother Emanuel, there's a story that just sticks with me because outside of the church, you know, people were crowded. Mrs. Pinckney had come by. She actually shook a few hands. I mean, all of it's just coming back to me right now. But the men of Alpha Phi Alpha were standing on the front of the church stairs. You know how the stairs kind of come down like that? And there was a white woman who happened to be visiting. I think it was from Michigan. It was somewhere up north. And she just had tears streaming down her eyes. And I could tell that she was looking around and she was confused and she wanted to ask a question, but she wasn't sure if she should ask the question. And, I just looked at her and I said, did you have a question? And she was like, well, she kind of wanted to ask. And I said, it's okay. You can ask. And she was like, well, I just wondered. She said, I see the men there dressed, in their black and their gold, and their black suits and the gold ties. She says, is that tradition for African-American funerals? And I was like, oh, no, ma'am. Those are his fraternity brothers, Senator Reverend Pinckney's fraternity brothers, the men of Alpha Phi Alpha. And she was so grateful. And so to just extend, to create a space, I like to call it create space and grace, right? To have space and grace to have those conversations where, you don't have to get defensive. You don't have to, make somebody feel bad for what they don't know, but to just have that space and grace to invite a dialogue that helps us end up in a better place.
Well, so you all will recently recall when the University of South Carolina women's basketball team did a notion of kneeling, and there was a little bit of backlash and controversy.
Still is.
I just had to jump in and I said, you know what, y'all? All y'all who were complaining about this, where was your outrage when the students were in 5 points at the onset of COVID and they didn't have masks on? So I often like to engage a conversation along those lines. And we're going to be critical because some young people have decided to stand up for human rights and justice. We then need to talk about what's going on in these bars and people don't have any mask on. I often find that it either calms the situation a little bit and people start thinking about the rationale, or either they defriend me and they go away. But I'm not pointed out because it was so glaring that we had no criticism of that activity, but yet we wanted to take a swipe at these young women. And I'm like, I'm not having it. I'm not having it, people.
No, and you don't have it, Carolyn. And that's the whole thing too, because, the whole notion of protest does not subscribe to your comfort zone. You don't get to tell somebody else how to protest, and, Colin Kaepernick kneeling, that was too much, for everybody, the protest, out in the streets, that's too much. I mean, so what exactly are, the confines that we're supposed to sit in, for a protest? And Carolyn, it's worth calling out or mentioning, not calling out, but that these women didn't just take that action on the court. They have been active off the court to support the same causes that they're working to raise awareness about. So they're backing it up.
Yeah.
But the point that Judy brings up, though, it's kind of interesting, and that is the inherent double standard that we have to deal with in the way we cover stories. You bring up Colin Kaepernick, but then again, you look at what happened at the Capitol on January 6th, and it's two totally different narratives.
It is.
It
is. And I'm still waiting for more news and information on prosecutions. I'm a little uncomfortable, but you know what? I mean, we're also all grown enough to know. We're all grown enough to know that there are some politics that are at play as well. And we know that an administration is transitioning and they want to get that first 100 days in. I get all that, but I'm fully expecting people to be held accountable. I don't have any problems with you standing up and stating what you stand for. But as I always say, there are consequences. And I'm just hoping everybody's with me when we are looking for those consequences to be carried out. I mean, some of this behavior was outrageous. It was outrageous. And to think some folks thought they were going to fly to DC, protest, and come back and run their offices, run their CEO offices, be lawyers in insurance companies. I mean, this is outrageous. I mean, look, I'm obviously very emotional and I have to calm down about this, but the reality is I'm still waiting for some prosecutions from the insurrection that failed. And am not anticipating anything to happen tomorrow in Washington, D.C. So I know everybody's running around with the March 4th date. Let's clarify a fact. I'm counting on my tax dollars to have the National Guard out tomorrow and any other security needed so that President Biden, who has been duly elected, can handle business that we sent him to D.C. to handle.
So while you guys are talking, just briefly on the cancel culture, by the way, that word drives me crazy because it's not cancel culture, it's consequence culture. You can say, Carolyn, you just said it, you can say what you want, but there will be fallout from what you say. So if your job is a realtor and you are trying to sell homes, but on Sunday or Wednesday or whatever day January 6th was, I can't remember, I think it was Wednesday, you're out there doing your insurrection activities, and then you think you're going to come back, just like what you said, Carolyn, and it's going to be business as usual. No. And there will be consequences, and there will be people like you, Carolyn, like I think everybody on this call who will be watching to make sure that those consequences are meted out, appropriately. There isn't, the thing that drives me crazy is the level of, the false comparison to the Black Lives Matter movements during the summer and protests versus trying to overthrow a government. Please don't. And that's where I fault people for not thinking this out properly. Critical thinking skills, they're gone. We have an entire population who really can't put 2 + 2 together. But if you really sat it down and you looked at these things, they're not the same. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Black woman. I'm saying because one of those is, trying to overthrow a government. And so it's frustrating. It's really frustrating to see. It's really frustrating to have these conversations with people who don't want to learn. And that's where I lose it.
Well, Renee, it's like memes on social media have become like they replace facts. And I'm like, it's a meme, and they're, one person will post and they're like, well, what about this? And I'm like, and then I, stop what I'm doing and take time to fact check and say, well, no, this is when Pelosi said this and it wasn't about the protest, it was about this. Or this is when Kamala Harris said this and it wasn't about that, it was about this, and then they, want to change the topic. But it's just, oh gosh, facts matter. I mean, that's all I can say is that facts matter. And that the other thing is people believe what they want to believe.
Yep.
It's really that simple. They believe what they want to believe. I mean, because that was the whole thing about the election results. It was like, well, let's make this make sense, because it even got to the point of, the Supreme Court was out to undermine the election. I'm like, for what reason? People who have no, they have lifetime appointments. I mean, they could do whatever they want to do. But I mean, the way that you have to contort yourself to come up with some kind of line of reasoning for that is incredible to watch. It's incredible to watch.
If you've ever, I don't know if anyone's gone down some of those rabbit holes, and I don't want to say the name here, but it starts with a Q and ends with an N. If you've gone down any of those rabbit holes, it is like shocking, the things that are held together by basically spit and baling wire. There are no facts. It's all, it's all magic and magical thinking. And because it was a full moon in the Farmer's Almanac on this date, then this is going to happen. It'll blow your mind.
Someone asked the other day, I heard someone ask, what happens after tomorrow when nothing happens and this government continues to run in the democracy that we voted for? Someone said, well, they'll just come up with another date that they'll rally around. So I would say, Brandon, stay tuned. We'll probably be having this discussion in another 6 months, another year. Stay tuned.
Here to explain, I'm just sitting back enjoying the whole discussion because I mean, and people are really getting fired up on Facebook too. Felicia Snyder saying people are willfully blind. Big Card, thanks for watching as well. One of our fellow colleagues in journalism watching the show. So I mean, yes, we could definitely talk about this all night.
Well, good to hear from you. I used to work at WSB in Atlanta, and I think the thing that does allow me to stay at least somewhat sleep at night or rest a little bit at night is that I do know that there are folks like Judy who are still in the chair and still, work off of fact-based journalism and giving us information that has been thought through, verified. Someone tried to tell me the other day, I thought you all used to do double checking of facts. I'm like, folks are still fact checking. That's not, let's stay focused here. But that allows me to sleep at night. And there are several other members, obviously, of our colleagues in National Association of Black Journalists. Bravo. We have a tough job. We have to do the job and then really do another job to make sure that everybody else is doing the right job. So we must stay vigilant, but I appreciate those who are on the front line and doing the work we're doing.
And I want to echo that and just congratulate Steve one more time. I know our time has gone by so quickly, but the incredible work that Steve has done over the years and the documentaries and the compelling interviews that he has done to chronicle and tell our stories is just to be admired and applauded. And for him and his beautiful wife, Kathy, to donate the collection of his work to the Civil Rights Center at the University of South Carolina is such a gift to our community and to the next generation and to young journalists that I hope will inspire them to continue that important work. So Steve, I just had to take an opportunity one more time to say thank you for that.
Bravo.
Well, let me just say how much I admire this group here. I first met Renee when she was in working so in the station. And Carolyn, I remember when you anchored the weekends at WIS. And the story I love telling about Judy was when we covered the inauguration, and it was so cold, and 8 of us, including her husband, were all cramped together in the satellite fine warmth.
Yes.
And then, Brandon, I've done your radio show. I remember you from, the Pink Ice Ball in Columbia, and the like. So, in the words of the OJs, it's family reunion.
Right.
That's exactly what I call it.
Renee, I'd like to,
It is a family.
and Renee, I'd like to buy a vowel Q and N, okay?
Wait,
Can I buy an A or an O? Can I buy a vowel in your Q and your N?
Oh,
Yeah. Can I buy an A or an O?
Hey, look, Steve, you better hurry up and buy it before they get a civil
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
Have to go down.
And do I get some pizza out of DC to go with that?
Yeah. Well,
this
it's
has
great
been
seeing all
fun.
of you all tonight. It's
Guys,
been
thank you guys so much this has been amazing. We're gonna have to do this again for sure, because we could talk about a wide array of topics. I knew that this was going to be one of the most dynamic discussions that people would engage in and enjoy. Thank you so much to all of the viewers tonight for commenting. Your voice matters, and that's the reason why we wanted to host this discussion, so that way that we as Black journalists, we hear you. We hear what you're saying, we see what you're saying, and we understand exactly where you are coming from, and that there needs to be that balance of understanding that there are viewers out there who really do get what's going on, and then there are others who are just committed to their own ignorance, and we're going to leave them there. So, Judy, Steve,
Pray for him, brother.
Thank you so much. I like to keep it real, so we're going to keep it real again in the future. I know we're out of time. Thank you guys so much again. I cannot thank you enough for being here. We will see you all. I will be in touch, and I will see you guys next time we do this. I'm ready.
Thanks, Brandon. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Have a great night.
Good night.
See ya.